Hi, welcome to Chalice Garage and the replacement of the passenger side mirror assembly. To replace the mirror assembly, you need to remove the entire door panel, and the easiest way to start is to remove this handle panel gently and carefully. Do not yank on the panel or you might break a piece of plastic. And while they might be made of plastic, they are expensive to replace. With that panel removed, the window control panel is easy to pop out and wiggle out. Just like that. And once you've got it out, then the next step is to remove the wiring harness. With a small flat blade screwdriver, press on the tab that is part of the harness connector and gently pull the wiring from the panel. Behind the door opener lever, there is a small panel that can be pried open very gently, or you will nick the plastic. Once it's loose, you can arrange it and it falls right out. Move the handle out of the way, and there it goes. Next is to remove the bolts that hold the door panel to the door, starting with popping out some of the attachments using a plastic tool. Again, you don't want to yank. Just gently pry the panel away from the door until you hear something of a pop, just to get the panel loose. Then we go to the bolts. The bolts take a 10mm socket, which I've attached here on an extension on a 1/4-inch ratchet. You can start with any bolt, but I just happen to start with this one. Here is one of the bolts and the way it looks. And as you place the bolts down on a space, arrange them in their relative position. That way you know which hole they go back to. Now, with the bolts out, you can finish unclipping the panel And once all the clips are released, gently lift up on the panel. There's a groove beneath the window glass on the door, and then once you've got it out of the groove, you can pull it gently away from the door. Those cables leading to the door opener and lock are likely sufficient to hold the panel on its own. However, just to be sure, the best thing to do is provide supplemental support, and I will use a bungee cord for that purpose. Next is to pop out the little, what I call, triangle panel at the front of the door to reveal the attachments, the nuts and bolts that holds the mirror assembly onto the door. The triangle panel has foam to help prevent water intrusion. Unclip the wire that actuates the mirror motor, then the nuts can be loosened from the assembly. Again, it is a 10mm socket. And as you see, they're on there fairly tightly. They seem to be much tighter than the panel's bolts. Loosen all 3 nuts and remove 2 of the 3, leaving the 3rd to hold the assembly to the door until you can get to the other side and support the assembly while you remove the 3rd nut. You may have to support the mirror assembly in order to remove some of the load on the nut, so you can hand turn it to get it off. Moving to the other side of the door, supporting the assembly so that you can remove the 3rd nut. Once the final nut is removed, then the assembly can be gently moved away from the door. Now, gently wiggle off the assembly. Everything is gentle. Nothing is forced or yanked. And remove the assembly from the door, being careful not to catch the wires. And then you see the whole entire assembly, minus the mirror that got knocked out, which is why I have to replace it in the first place. The replacement mirror assembly arrived in this box, and inside the box is packed fairly well, and there are instructions on that lid. Follow those instructions. There's the assembly cover that is black and ready to be painted to the color of your car. The assembly itself is in this protective bag. Inside the assembly panel is a foam that you will use to apply to the mirror assembly prior to installing on the door that will help protect against water intrusion. The corners of the mirror assembly are protected with these pieces of rubber. Rather a thoughtful measure, and I'm very impressed. Along these tracks are where you'll put the foam, and there are also bolt covers to help protect the threads of the bolt from being damaged. Here is the old mirror assembly, and you can see how the foam has been squished and it's kind of old. It's really thoughtful that they sent some new foam for the new assembly, as the old foam will not be very useful. And now, the new mirror assembly with the new foam attached. Look how much nicer that looks. It'll do a much better job than reusing the old foam. Once the foam is installed and the bolt cover is removed, it is now time to attach the assembly to the door. Gently arrange the wires in through the holes and the bolts into their respective holes. Once the mirror is set, then hold the mirror while also attaching a bolt to keep the mirror in place so that it doesn't fall. And you can see here the one nut that's been applied to hold the mirror in place. And it's time to put on the other two. First, tighten the nuts to hand tight only. In order to get a good even seal, tighten each nut in turn a little bit at a time, 2 or 3 turns each, and then rotate around each nut 2 or 3 turns. That pulls the entire assembly as one unit to the door rather than one side or one portion at a time. And gives a nice even seal without any warpage or gaps. There is no need to over-tighten these nuts. Tight enough is good enough. And voila! The new assembly on the door. Part of the instructions is to manually move the mirror up and down, left and right. Here you see how the parts are arranged on the floor mat. Each part has a place, and they sit there until ready to be reinstalled. Next is the installation of the triangle panel, and you can see how the foam has been straightened. Prior to attaching the panel, partially plug in the mirror motor wiring so that you can make sure it does not get pinched when the panel is attached. There are gaps in the panel where the wiring will fit so that it does not get pinched and it moves freely. Always check to make sure that the wire runs free. And the panel simply pops on with a snap. And then reinsert the wiring. The next step is to test to make sure that the motor works. And what do you know? It's working! Yay! Since the mirror works, next is to attach the door panel back to the door after removing your supplemental support. It will first align into the groove at the bottom of the door glass at the top of the metal, and then once you have those alignments made, it simply just pops in through the catches on the door. Once the door panel is popped in, then it's time to replace the bolts. Once the bolts have been reinstalled, then you reinstall the various sub-panels. I've already reinstalled the bolts, and now we are reinstalling the sub-panels. As so. Attach the wiring harness to the lock and window control panel, and then once that is attached, you arrange the panel in its position, and then it simply snaps into place. For the handle panel, you see this hook here, and it fits into the gap on the door just like that, and then align it and snap it into place. The snaps are solid and sure. You should not have any play or any wiggle. That's done. Next, we test the workings of the buttons. There goes the window, down and up. And the door lock works, but will not fully lock while the keys are in the car. What a nice feature. Yay! All done! Just about. Now, it's time to attach the assembly cover. We're going to reuse the old cover because it's just fine. There's nothing broken about it. It would have been easier to remove the cover from the old assembly while it was attached. However, I didn't think that far ahead. And inside here you can see how the clips attach. Here's the cover detached. You can see two of the clips. There are numerous clips, 5 or 6 I think. Not all of them are easy to get to. Which is why it would have been so much easier to remove while the assembly was attached. Whoops! But I got it, and it's done. So now we get ready to reattach. arrange the mirror motor wiring so that it does not get pinched. And then arrange the cover over the assembly, aligning the clips, and then popping the clips together. It aligns specifically and sure, and there should be no play or gap at the seam. And you see here, the seam is perfect without a gap. And there it is. We're all set. Thanks so much for watching.